So now we're pretty much ready to define our power copy. We have our frame element. We can go back and actually, let's go back to let's turn back our original base points. I want to go change an option so that I can see my reference points. Display, visualization. I'm going to turn on Z buffer so now I can kind of see through this geometry. So if I actually go in and double click on our original points that are defining our splines, and let's say update this so that it says, I don't know, 7 feet. Nope, not Y feet. And say OK. You can see that it moved the point and the frame moved with it. So it seems like our constraints are working as expected. So now we can define our frame as a power copy. So in order to do that, oh, one other thing that I didn't mention. When creating our the relationship between the frame profile that we created as a sketch and our two frame width and height parameters, it also created this relations node in the tree, and this is also an option that I've set. And it shows you the relationship between these named parameters and the geometrical elements within the sketch. So this is making an explicit relationship that you've defined available from within the specification tree. And you'll see why that's important in a second. So now that we have our frame, we'll go to Insert, Advanced Replication Tools, Power Copy Creation. And now we're in our Power Copy definition menu. And because we've defined all of the elements necessary to generate the frame within one geometrical set, we just need to click on that set. And you can see that it puts under the output window, it shows you the geometrical set that's going to be created. And so it will create the geometrical set and all of the geometry contained within that geometrical set. And on the right, you can see the different input elements that are required. So you can see our intersection plane and then the 4 splines that the plane is intersecting with. And so a part of the kind of craft of defining power copies is being very clear about the way that relationships are built between elements so that you're minimizing the number of inputs required. This basically helps you when you're actually instantiating the power copy. Here we can actually give the power copy a more specific name, so we'll call it frame. We'll click on the Inputs tab. The one thing that's actually missing from this definition are our relations. So I'll click back to the definition tab really quick, and we're going to go ahead and click on our 2 formulas from within the relations node. And you can see that it added 2 formulas as part of the output, and it added the 2 parameters, the name parameters frame height and frame width, as required inputs now. So this pretty much defines all of the elements that we would need to create instances of this frame element. So now when we switch to the Input tab, you can see all of the input parameters are listed. You can actually use these arrows to change the order if you want them to be in a specific order, but this works pretty well. The one that we want to actually change is the plane, because all of the rest of these elements are going to be the same for each frame, right? So as we instantiate the frame, the 4 splines stay the same, and the frame width and frame height are going to stay the same. The only thing that's going to change with each one is this input plane. So we're going to go ahead and delete the point 1 from the plane parameter name so that it becomes more generic, and we'll leave all the rest the same. Oops, I think you have to hit enter here. Yeah, there you go. The parameters tab lists all of the parameters that are within this power copy, and again, most of these are just defined implicitly through modeling. If you scroll all the way down, you can see the 2 relations that we added explicitly at the bottom. I'm not going to go over the Documents tab, and then from the Properties tab, we can create a little screen capture, which allows you to visually know the element that you're instantiating based on this little preview. So then we'll say OK, and you can see that it added a Powercopy node to the specification tree, and under that Powercopy node we now have the frame Powercopy. So now all that's left to do is to instantiate our Powercopy. So we'll right click on our frame Powercopy element, and under frame object we'll go to instantiate. And you can see one of the big drawbacks, or I'd say problems with CATIA's user interface, is the number of pop-up warning messages that you'll get whenever you're making changes to elements. If you break a relationship or do something that will disrupt the relationship between any element, you're always getting these warning pop-ups. Sometimes they're important, but other times they're just telling you that something's happening. And it creates an impression that you need to actually deal with each one of these, which isn't always the case. So what this warning is just telling us is that the elements that we've defined within the geometrical set can go within a geometrical set, but the two elements that we define that are outside of our geometrical set, the two formulas, will need to go somewhere else. This is another location, and basically it's going to try to stick them underneath the relations node. We can make a small change to our Powercopy so that this error doesn't pop up, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. So for now we'll just say OK, and you can see that it brings up this nice kind of interface that allows you to still dynamically interact with your model, but you can also interact with this kind of preview, which shows you the frame element that you're trying to instantiate and lists all of the inputs required. So as we scroll down this list, you can see all of our splines, the frame height parameter, and the frame width parameter. So one of the best features of instantiating Powercopies is this Use Identical Name button. So if we click this, you can see that it automatically populated all of our elements within the model that have the same name as the input element. So that's why it's important that you don't rename those elements if you know that you're going to be using it within a context where they have the same name. And so you can see that it did the same for all the splines and also our two named parameters. The one that it didn't automatically fill out is our plane input, which is the one that's going to change, right? So we click inside of the selected area, and we go over and we pick the second plane that we'll use to instantiate the frame element. So once we've done that, we can say preview, and hopefully your frame will look like this. And so you can see there's the slight difference between the two frames based off of the changing relationship between our base curves. You can see now this angle this element is angled rather than completely vertical. And so this is the basic process of instantiating Powercopies. So I want to say OK. We're just going to instantiate that one. I'm going to show you a trick. Let's undo that. And let's undo our Powercopy creation. And I'll show you a trick really quick that allows you to get rid of that one annoying pop-up. So what we want to do is actually take our relations, and instead of putting them at the kind of part level, at the global level, we want to move those relations into the geometrical set that contains the frame geometry. So we'll do that just by doing cut and paste. So we'll say cut, and you'll see that it disappears, and then we'll go down and we'll right click on our geometrical set and we'll say paste, and you'll see that now relations point 2 shows up underneath our geometrical set, and you can see our two formulas are still valid. So by doing this, now we've basically kind of self-contained everything within this geometrical set. So there's no longer the need to place the two relations outside of the set at the top level, which is a really nice kind of way of encapsulating a Powercopy feature. So we'll go through the process of defining the Powercopy again. Advanced replication, Powercopy creation. Oops, you don't want to pre-select anything, just unless you pre-select the element, the geometrical set, because otherwise it uses that as the input. So we'll go back, we'll click on geometrical set, and you'll see it automatically pulled across all the elements, all the input elements that we needed, and it automatically included the frame height and width now because the relations are underneath the geometrical set, which is what we want. Go ahead and rename it again to frame. Click on our input tab, delete the point 1 so our plane is more generic, keep everything else the same. And we'll go over to properties and create our screen grab and then say OK. So now we're going to instantiate our frame Powercopy the same as we did before. So we'll right click on frame, go to frame object, instantiate. We'll click the use identical name button. That automatically populates all the elements with the same name. And we'll click on our second plane. And you'll notice that we didn't get the warning about the relations needing to go into another location, and that's because everything now is underneath the one geometrical set. The one thing that we're going to change is destination. We're going to switch that from inside geometrical set 5 to after. And what that will do is that instead of putting another set inside of this set, it will create another geometrical set on the outside, which will contain the new frame element. So that's an important thing. And you can also go ahead and name your geometrical set something here automatically, or it will just name, it'll give it this automatic generic name with, you know, point whatever number that you're on. The final thing that we want to do, we'll just go ahead and say preview. Make sure everything looks good. You can see that it creates the geometrical set here. The last thing that we want to do is click the repeat button. And so what the repeat button does is it allows you to stay within the Powercopy instantiation command, so it speeds up the process of placing all of the Powercopies. So by clicking the repeat button, when we click OK, you can see the element was created, but we're still within the Powercopy command. So now we can go up. We can change our plane to the next plane in the line, and we'll say OK, which creates the next frame. We'll click back up, click the plane, hit OK, creates the next, and you can see that it's creating all of these geometrical sets automatically under the tree. Change the plane, hit OK. Change the plane, hit OK, and 2 more times, and we're done. And so on the last one, we can just close out of the Powercopy command, and we have all of our frame elements instantiated. And you can see that even though the interface is manual, it required that I pick each one of those planes, that by using the use identical name and the repeat command, it makes the process of instantiating Powercopies fairly quick. One of the big limitations of CATIA and Digital Project is that without getting into either some scripts within Visual Basic or within CATIA's engineering knowledge language, it's pretty difficult, well, it's actually impossible to automate the instantiation of Powercopies. So it's a manual affair until you start to get into some scripting. And there's some scripts online that you can download that are that allow you to automatically generate Powercopies or instantiate Powercopies. So those can be pretty useful if you're just starting out. So now that we've instantiated all of the Powercopies, we can start to flex our model. So I'll go back to our original reference plane, and we can change the offset value by dragging it. And you can see everything is updating correctly. Say OK. We can go in and modify some of our base points. So let's make this one taller. this guy down a little bit. And you can see that the response is pretty quick, and that's mainly because we're using surfaces rather than solids, so it's going to update fairly quickly. We can also go in and change globally the frame height and width values. So we can go ahead and make all of the frames 1 foot thick instead of 6 inches, and you can see they all update. And change the width to, say, 8. And so this was the main reason for including those relations inside of the geometrical set. It maintains the relationship with the parameters at a global level, so you can make modifications to all of the frames at once. You can also create the Powercopy so that each one would be locally modifiable, but that becomes more difficult to control. So it's usually advantageous to leave parameters out at a global level. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I look forward to making some more.